Okay, I think we're just going to wait. Hi, all the participants are now live. We're gonna wait. I see there's about 50 people on right now. So we'll wait a few minutes before we start.
I was hoping I'd get to see the 50 people.
Say it again?
I was hoping I'd get to see the 50 people.
Yeah.
Sound is funny.
Hey. Can you mute
all hear that?
participants? Because there's a lot.
Who is this person?
That was John Swartley.
Oh,
Hey, John.
Hi, John.
He's going to be on the panel.
is he?
Is Mike?
He's under Mike Cleare.
Yeah.
Mike, there are two of you.
It looks like he used your link. So
I'm going to
just-
choose the younger one.
Something is weird with the sound. It's like really high pitched.
Is it high for you? Maybe
Yeah.
everyone, if you can turn down your volume a little bit, it might be feedback.
Do you want us to mute unless we're...
No, it's okay. Just turn it down a little bit. Okay, there's 70 people now.
So I think we have a quorum. We can start.
Yeah, I think we should get started. So. Let's see. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the T3PO webinar, Tech Transfer and Telecommuting, Productivity and Operations. I'm Marivi Valcourt, and I'll be your MC today. I'm the Marketing Manager for UCLA Technology Development Group. A little bit about the webinar. It's scheduled to last about an hour. And I encourage everyone to use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. And I'll do my best to float the questions up to the panelists during the event. So right now we'll start with introductions. I'd like to introduce one of our moderators, Associate Vice Chancellor, CEO and President of UCLA Technology Development Group, Amir Naiberg.
Thank you, Marvin. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. The purpose of this webinar is to learn from those who thought we saw it all until COVID came in. We are very grateful for leaders of our industry that went through the 2001 bubble burst, September 11, and the 2008 financial crisis to share with us what lessons they have learned during those crises and what we can implement and do in order to serve our communities better during this current crisis. So I'd like to start to launch off this webinar by doing a round of self-introductions. We will start with Carl and then move to Kathy, Mike, and Michael. Carl, please.
Yeah, I'm Carl Gulbrandsen, past Managing Director of Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, otherwise known as WARF. WARF is the patent management organization for University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I was at WARF during 2001, the bubble burst, and 2007, 2008 economic meltdown, and then the following Great Recession. Both were learning experiences. Both caused WARF to change policies and change practices. But nothing like what we're all experiencing right now.
I'm Kathy Koo. I ran the Stanford Office of Technology Licensing for 27 years, from 1991 to 2018. And so also went through these various crises.
Hi, I'm Mike Cleare. I was in industry for 35 years in industrial management as well as research before I happily got myself into tech transfer. I ran the Columbia University Tech Transfer Office, certainly during 9/11. I remember that very well, being in New York. And I was then went on to run the Office of Technology Transfer at the University of Pennsylvania. And that's where I was when we had the depression and the economic crisis in 2008. I have to say that this makes those pale into insignificance. But I still think there are some interesting thoughts to share. I definitely, as you can tell by my somewhat shaggy white appearance, fall into the veteran category, not the current category. Anyway, nice to be with you.
And my name is Michael Straightiff, and I'm the Executive Director of the University of Virginia's Licensing and Ventures Group. I've been at UVA since 2011. Prior to that, however, during the 2007-2008 financial meltdown, I worked for Case Western Reserve University in the Technology Transfer Office. I'm very happy to be with everybody today.
Right, so let me move on to the first question that's addressed to Carl. So Carl, WARF is known as an organization with substantial resources and being very fortunate in its tech transfer activities. Despite or because of that fact, how did you guys deal with previous crises? Did you have to change something in your practices, and what lesson we can learn from that today?
I have to unmute.
Carl, you are on mute.
There we go. Okay, I would say that the principal changes for WARF occurred in the 2007-2008 economic meltdown, and then the following Great Recession. We learned both there and to some extent in the 2001 meltdown, the fact that our traditional licensees were losing their interest in taking on risk and wanting others to take that risk. So it forced us, after the economic meltdown of 2007, 2008, to really pay more attention to strategies that could be used to de-risk technologies to make them more attractive to both startup companies and ongoing concerns. And also work closely with the university to develop strategies to attract funding for de-risking technologies that just came out of the laboratory. In that era, then the accelerator program started. A lot more effort was put in to building tools for faculty and students to start companies, and also attract investment dollars. And I think those things, just continue to WARF just continued to work on those throughout that period, and even today, in talking with Eric Iverson and with Jennifer Gottwald, licensing manager at WARF, and with Greg Keenan, who does venture and the accelerator program. They've really stepped those programs up, and they're working very closely with the university and community leaders to help keep things going. So I'm very proud of them.
So Kathy, you were in the center of Silicon Valley in Stanford when the bubble burst. How did that affect your business, and how long did it take you to rebound?
So it's a very interesting, we've kept good statistics for all the years that OTL was in existence. And so the 2008 meltdown started September of 2008, and that's the beginning of our fiscal year. We saw a 30% drop in licenses for that year. And then it took about 2 years, almost 3, for the activity to rebound to the level that it had been. So clearly there will always be a rebound. But I do think that tech transfer offices have to expect there's going to be a downturn. I've always said that the number of licenses that we can do really depends on the economy and how robust it is. And so again, I think an office has to expect that there's going to be a downturn, but it will come up, and you just need to prepare your higher level administration for that reality.
So Mike, in your case, how did you plan to rebound for the downturn in the economy, which I'm sure you experienced? What proactive steps current leaders can take in order to get their office ready for an uptick in the economy?
Well, I think what we did then is even more relevant today. But in many ways, I can trace back to 2008 an increased emphasis on relationships with the investment community and an increase in startups, because industry was not in a position to do licensing. Licensing in was not a high priority. Yes, sponsored research was important, because that not only brought money into the university, but with the right terms, it was of a great interest to industry. But I think that depression sort of put impetus behind what you now see, where startups are an increasingly important, if not a majority, way of getting technologies out into the outside world. And that sort of fits in with what Carl was saying about de-risking. It's sort of risking in a different way, but certainly we found it was very important to start emphasizing economic development. We found it was very important to start talking about the social impact of what we do, and it was the start, I believe, of an upsurge in startups, and startups as a vehicle for incubating our technologies. Now, if we bring that forward today, we're starting at a much higher base of startups versus licensing. So I'm not quite sure how I'm predicting what will happen, but what I do predict is that that we need to constantly emphasize the fact that we're not just about making money for the university. We're about helping with economic development. And I think we should be talking to the departments, to the schools, anybody in the university, and saying, what can we do to help? Not only in terms of perhaps bringing in money from various sources, some of which could be industry, some of which may be the investment community, but we must be using this time to sharpen our message about what we're doing this for. And never has America needed its R&D capabilities being brought into being translated into reality. Never has it needed it more than it does after a crisis like this. And we should be there with a message that we're ready to make that happen and to help.
So one of the questions that have come up is, was there something you eventually implemented during a crisis that you wish you would have started sooner?
If that's a question to me, there's lots of things that in hindsight I wish I would have invested sooner. But I think one of the things that that I wish I'd worked on harder and sooner was getting access to accelerator type funds that the university had some control over, so that we could take startups and put them in a position where we de-risk them a bit ourselves. And I think that trend, which has taken place slowly but surely over the last 10 years, I wish we'd started that earlier, because it's incredibly important that the university can help just de-risk a technology and make it more attractive, either for licensing or for the startup role. And I wish I'd started that earlier.
I think that's one thing that we learned, is that there's a lot of de-risking of the technologies that are more practically done within the university than within a startup. Because you move the technology, just as a nascent technology out of the university into the startup, it's just, it's still too high risk for them. And if you can take some of the risk out, do the work at the university, a lot of this isn't funded by the federal government or by outside foundations. But as Mike said, if you can find funds to help fund that kind of accelerating work, you're going to serve your startups much better, and you may also interest ongoing concerns to license the technology. So it's money well spent. It's very important. It's too bad that the federal government doesn't fund that more.
I also think that it's important to, we've always known it's a relationship business, and in times that are really good and busy, we probably neglect the relationship because the deals are coming in. And now you have to go back and make those stronger relationships, get to know the VCs better and see what they're interested in. They will still be nosing around. It's just that they'll be very selective. And so again, if you really get to know them better and to develop more relationships, because everybody has a little bit more time, I think that would serve you well.
So perhaps one interesting data point is that between Deerfield, Arch Ventures, and another fund, which Flagship, they raised $3 billion in the last week. So potentially, at least for life sciences, there'll be some venture fund money going in and helping us rebuild the economy bottom up. And so with that, we'd like to move to a different topic and ask everyone is, you all anticipate that our deal flow will go down because people are reluctant to invest in early stage dangerous assets. We're always so busy, so if we're relatively less busy, what is a good use of our time during this period?
This is Kathy. I'm always interested in developing better marketing materials. And so I think a lot of universities do stress that, but they also don't have as much time. So you can develop good marketing materials, both internally, externally, about the technologies. I think if you really have time, you can develop SOPs or try to make your processes a little bit more efficient. And most times when people are busy, that's the last thing on their plate. But now sometime it's to clean up your little pantry.
I agree. This is it's a good time to clean up your backlog. Everybody's got work on their desk that they can't get to because they're too busy with everything else. And this is a good time to get to it. It's also, a good time to continue to build relationships. You can't go out and socialize person to person, but the internet today is perfect for bringing groups together and talking about common problems that startups have or common problems that industry leaders have that they want to visit about, and maybe in a private conversation.
And I'll piggyback on top of that. It is more difficult to build new relationships in an environment like this, but leveraging your existing relationships. One of the things that I'm really hopeful that we'll dive into during this time is leveraging UVA's alumni, friends, and family network. These people are extremely loyal to the institution, want to see it bounce back from whatever downturn we experience as a result of this. So really, can we work with our institutional partners to leverage those alumni, friends, and family network to drive business development relationships?
Yeah, I would encourage everyone to look at the backlogs. Unless offices have changed a lot in the last few years, most offices have to make priorities. They're lean and mean, and some things fall behind. There are backlogs, certain types of agreements I've noticed, IIAs and things like that. There's always a backlog there. But one thing I had particularly in mind in my experience, is that that taking care of the patent portfolio is something that often takes a back seat. Culling, prioritizing the patent portfolio, having a reevaluation of unlicensed patents that are in there, whether they should be treated the same, whether they should be dropped instead of, you know, instead of going to PCT, whether they should be US only or whatever. This is an ideal time for that we never get round to.
And of course, you know, everybody's got to tighten their belts. So what Mike is talking about actually does save you money by culling out technologies that you're never going to be able to license or develop and cutting those costs. And you can do that without cutting employees.
And I also think that this is a time where you can reach out to industry. If you think you have a promising technology that hasn't been licensed, try to find out why. What is the experiment that needs to be done? What has to be done in order to make it more interesting to companies? Because a lot of times we don't get that feedback. So ask for it.
So some of the comments coming in is that people are not less busy. They're actually quite busy with the onset of COVID and trying to get their researchers funding and things like that. So what kind of messaging and communication strategies specifically do you suggest? And another part of that question is, what do you think of open access technology frameworks specifically for COVID?
So
I'll comment real quickly here. We at UVA LVG have definitely experienced kind of the deluge that's happening right now. I've been busier the last 3 weeks than I was the preceding 3 weeks. But I do expect, however, that initial the longer this persists, that this initial onslaught will slow down. You know, as research has slowed down at our universities, you have to expect a resulting slowdown in invention disclosures. So this immediate near term, I think, might be artificially busy for us. And if this endures much longer, we will have that slowdown period. So I do think we need to be cognizant of what might be a short-term increase in activity.
And so what I'm constantly challenging my team is how to remain relevant. And it's not only the current ongoing influx of deals or disclosures because faculty are at home and have time to write IRs, but it's also establishing a resources page for funding of COVID-19 projects. It's reaching out to our startup companies, make sure that they're doing okay, working within our community and help. Actually, we've spent some time helping secure resources to our health system, as well as moving to an open source model. So on the second question on open source, we encourage our faculty to use open source model whenever it involves PPE or ventilator designs. I think that's a very good solution for those projects where we are looking to have a social impact on a very short term. As far as actually developing drugs and vaccines, we're in discussion with industry. Not everyone agrees to develop products without exclusivity, but they are willing to place in accessibility programs and making sure that in case they're not serving a certain community, we can convert the license from exclusive to a non-exclusive one. So we're working into those hybrid models that gives industry some upside, but allowing us to serve the global good of healthcare with these projects.
The other thing that folks at WARF are doing is going through their agreements and with both startups and with ongoing concerns, and touching base with those that are probably having real problems, have milestone payments coming due, working with them to make sure that they are sure that they're not going to be terminated because of a deficiency in payments or because they're delaying their development work. But just doing whatever they can do to strategize with them to help better succeed.
Another thing we initiated is just having a list of COVID-related projects. I mean, as a central office, we're in a perfect place to know exactly who has moved into the space that wasn't there before. So we have an ongoing ledger of COVID-related projects that we share with everyone and soon publish on our website. So it'd be very transparent who is doing what and where on campus.
Yeah, I do some work with Arizona State University, and I've noticed that suddenly COVID has appeared in a lot more disclosures and a lot more of the activity. So I think it's incredibly important that everyone has a COVID section on their website, and capital letters, if you like, so so people have the opportunity to see what might be relevant that's coming out.
One thing that technology transfer offices are generally good at and can be used very much during this period is helping to build networks and build collaborations. And this is certainly true in the COVID area of bringing groups together that are interested in working on it, that have different strengths in that area, and getting them to work virtually together. And I know that this has been happening at Madison with startups that are developing vaccines. One of our startups are working with a researcher at the university that's an expert in vaccines, and partnering with a company in India to get it towards clinical trials. And it's happening in a lot of other universities too.
I'm going to step in and ask Amir and Michael, how are you running your day-to-day operations now? How did you get the office working together in this telecommuting situation? Amir?
Thanks. So I think it's different stages of survival. First one, about 10 days before we went virtual, we realized that that's coming around the corner. And from an office that had 0 telecommuting, we have to ramp up and go to 100% telecommuting. And realized that IT was going to be a big bottleneck because not everybody actually had laptops. Went out and rented a bunch of laptops, allowed the team members to take the monitors home, office chairs and things like that, just to make things comfortable. And then survival stage number 2 was people getting in their homes, setting up home offices, working when there are kids and pets in the background at odd hours of the day, but trying to figure out their new routine. And I think now we're in survival mode number 3, where we're this amazing influx of projects related to COVID, which obviously are very important and high urgency, and we're trying to figure out through all of them and see if we can help them, or is our best mode of action is simply be out of their way and allow them to do whatever they want to do without any IP constraints.
Michael?
Yeah, we were moving into Q4 like many universities when this all went down, and the immediate transaction to work from home was actually shockingly smooth for us. We're an office of between 15 and 20 people. We had our IT people and our office manager really quickly come in and make sure everybody could get home. I think what's been most important for me though is trying to figure out now how we manage work from home with everybody being away. And we're fortunate again too that we have a pretty disciplined meeting schedule, and we've tried to adhere to that same meeting schedule. I think we've introduced one additional new meeting where everyone can get online and talk about what's going on. But because we have those routine meetings where every manager is meeting with their direct reports as a group, and then also meeting with those people individually during the week, we've been able to continue doing that. We have done the happy hour, the Zoom happy hour. A large number of our people eat lunch together every day, and so they did a Zoom lunch bunch where they got together and had lunch. But I think another important part of this is making sure you ask how everybody's doing. In this short time at UVA LBG, we've got tons of employees with large numbers of children at home trying to learn while they're doing tech transfer. We've had an employee's father pass away. We've had a wedding rescheduled. We've got spouses that are doctors, just really trying to accommodate the fact that everybody is going through something strange and is going to be dealing with it in a different way, and trying to permit that in the near term. But I'll end by saying that I do think that this is at least going to be a 2-phase process. We've got this immediate phase where we are dealing with a transition And honestly, we're dealing with portfolios that we were, again, I said we're in Q4 now. We're 3/4 through the fiscal year. The deals that we're doing today were started many months ago with business development, et cetera. Once those are gone, I think the real interesting work of relationship building and portfolio culling and all of that work will take place. But I would imagine my Q4 is going to continue to be very, very busy.
And I agree. What we're seeing is that deals that started earlier this year are actually, we were able to drive them into closure. And so if you look at fiscal year, it's going to end very, very strong. The question is, what do we do afterwards? Or will we be able to initiate new deals or not, especially when research has ramped down? And it's probably all a question of how long will people be locked up at homes, and when will research resume at universities? And right now, nobody has a good answer for that.
It does seem to, Kathy, it does seem to me, listening to these two guys who are actually doing it, that we are actually honing our virtual communication skills, and that in itself will be a valuable extra tool to use and incorporate into the way that offices work when they get back to whatever we're going to call normal, right? So I think that's quite important, the fact that everyone is now quite comfortable with virtual communication.
And one of the things that keeping me busy is the question is, how do you do business development in this new world? I mean, is the age of big conferences, is it gone? Will we stop going to JP Morgan and Bio and do meetings and reach out in a different way? And obviously this webinar is part of that trend, and other online sessions we're planning. I don't know how much time will it take to keep big conferences to resume operations, allow us to network as we used to do.
I'm hopeful that, Bio's partnering platform's been phenomenal. And while you do walk into a cube farm and sit down across a small table from those folks, there's no reason that same platform can't be leveraged for an electronic communication. So we do a ton of business development each year at Bio via that partnering platform. And I think we're hopeful that this year that transition to a digital Bio partnering platform will be productive.
One of the questions that have come up is, obviously a lot of tech transfer offices are concentrated on COVID, but do you think working and continuing and emailing, marketing other technologies, is that something that you suggest gets backed off from now because of what's happening, or just continue as usual?
I think continue as usual, or actually double down. I mean, people are at home looking to read interesting content. And so marketing materials is if it's well prepared, it's definitely something they look into, but perhaps think differently than the traditional NCDs, like a video series or things like that are engaging, that people can use or watch while sitting in front of their screens.
Yeah, I'll echo Kathy's point. She said, work on making better marketing materials. You've got captive audiences here. So double down on improving your materials, prioritizing your portfolio, and getting directed content to existing people that you have relationships with, in hopes that then they can share it with their relations.
I feel very strongly, sorry, that this is not a time to be ignoring other technologies. I feel very strongly that the US is one of the strengths of the US is its R&D, particularly its research universities. And I think it's going to be more important than ever that we efficiently translate those, and we shouldn't stop at all. I mean, people don't stop having other health problems, and there's huge needs for improved productivity in engineering industries that we can contribute to. So I feel very strongly that we should go on just marketing just as heavily the other technologies as COVID, while giving COVID obviously a prominent position at this particular point in time, but don't stop the others.
But I also agree that COVID is temporary. And for everybody's sake, it should be temporary. And there's going to be this attention, but it's a very crowded field right now. So I do think, as they say, cancer still happens and heart attacks are still happening. All of these issues are still happening. And so for sure, I think we should focus on a lot of the other technologies. Amir and Michael, are your priorities changing within the office?
So can I say COVID again? So that's definitely a priority. For example, another priority change is that, you know, like many of our offices, we have our own innovation fund or Bridge the Gap fund that we had to re-examine the project there with research. Not all labs are able to perform or meet their milestones, so figure out what to do with the resources that were freed up. With those activities going down for at least for a little bit. And as people said, you know, trying to hit on our relationships and see if everybody's doing okay, if we can be helpful either to startup companies, but also to deans and inside the university with our networks and our ability to really see many things that are happening at the university level that are not very transparent to deans who are focused on their own schools.
Yeah, I think from the office perspective, I think it's certainly encouraging and promoting continuity. You know, be it in processes inside the office or really just permitting licensees who sell into hospitals who aren't buying devices unless they're related to COVID, the runway that they need to come through on the other side of this. I know that my time personally has transitioned quite a bit to even elevating communications with institutional stakeholders about what we expect, et cetera. I mean, you know, beyond everything else, tech transfer offices are support organizations for the universities. And as research has wound down, I think it is our responsibility to try to identify resources to support ramping those things back up when we come back on the other side of this. And that does mean probably budget cuts, but it also means business development to support new sponsored research. We've got a handful of licensees right now that are very actively interested in sponsoring large amounts of research. So shifting emphasis and prioritizing getting those deals done so research dollars will flow has certainly been elevated on the priority list.
And making it more attractive to do sponsored research, Michael, I would chime in with on that. I think this is not a time for us to be playing hardball in any shape or form. I think this is a time for us to be making technologies as readily and easily available as we can.
Well, go on, Amir.
So I think one of the ways we've been using, to make universal research more accessible is to actually give the sponsors allow them to pre-negotiate the commercial terms. So if there's something that's coming out of the sponsored research, they know in advance what will be the future licensing terms. And we've been very successful in bundling these two agreements together. So it's basically a classical research agreement, but with the promise to the sponsor, if you would like to use your option and take a license, these are the financial terms. And that really streamlines the entire process and makes it much, much easier.
That's de-risking again, right?
Yeah, this is a perfect segue into the deal structures of the future. Again, one of the statistics that I used to keep track of was the new money that came in. This was, pretty much the upfront money that came in on new licenses rather than earned royalties or anything else. And in the downturn, the new monies was much lower than, typical years. And so do you think the deal structures are going to be a little bit different? Are you going to be less aggressive or more generous to the companies?
Well, I mean, I think we've talked about already that I do anticipate that this will result in a continual progression toward an increase in the number of startup companies, which then directly results in a decrease in the upfront fees up. So I would imagine that process continues. Any cash you're taking out of a business prior to value realization is probably going to be frowned on even more by your early stage investors as well as your VCs.
And I agree, and perhaps we'll see a shift and a movement from upfront fees and annual license fees to equity, and we'll just take more equity in these startup companies. But one line in the sand that I think we all have to draw is patent expenses. I mean, if the university is suffering, the budget is suffering. I think one area where we should insist is asking all of these licensees to continue to pay our patent expenses. Otherwise, we just run up a huge debt that will be impossible for us to ever recover.
So in regards to funding in general for tech transfer offices, what's come up is, the first question is, do you think there are specific programs as an industry that we can advocate to get more funding from the federal stimulus plan? And then the second part is, with the importance of innovation and all the research going, do you think this kind of public spotlight on universities' research, tech transfer, do you think it'll help gain more funding for our industry?
I think presently there's a lot of money that the federal government is putting towards small businesses with the payroll protection program. And there are going to be other programs to help small businesses. Tech transfer offices should be knowledgeable about those and help their startup companies go after those funds. And I think that as far as the attitude toward research, I agree with everything that Michael said, that now more than ever, research is important to this country and to the success of the country. And startups are an important part of that, as are universities themselves. Restarting this whole research program is going to be a very complicated thing. And we ought to do all give all the help that we can as far as networking and collaborating and bringing people together to get this done.
This may well be a good time as well to advocate for more advocation, being a more active advocate for translational research funding from the government. I mean, I think the general population is seeing the importance of a flexible, rapidly reacting R&D capability that we have, but it's totally dependent on our ability to be flexible and to move things quickly. And therefore, I think we could be making a case either through our organizations like Autumn, or maybe through individual university consortiums, to ask for translational funding. I think it's always been amazing to me that we put so much money into basic research and such a small proportion of that into the ability to get the results of that into a place where it can help the economy and society. And this may be a very good time to advocate for that.
I would advocate for two programs. One is direct tech transfer support. So whatever we call our bridge the gap programs, if universities will not be able to support them anymore, perhaps the government should allocate some money to do that through tech transfer offices. And the other one is some programs that perhaps will allow industry to reduce the risk in sponsored research in academia, in a way, in the form of some sort of matching funds. So if they support, a budget of $100,000, the government will supplement it in another $100,000, and bringing innovation closer to the market that way, while reducing risk to industry.
It's a good time to work with your government relations officers to reach out to your policymakers in the legislature and in Congress, to educate them about what technology transfer is about. Bayh-Dole has been important for, 35 years now? And it's an unfunded mandate. It puts a lot of pressures on the university to get things done, but it doesn't provide any funding for it. It's a good time to educate your governors. The states are the biggest beneficiaries of Bayh-Dole, of the importance of this and the importance of technology transfer when we're trying to rebuild our economy.
And I think demonstrating a tech transfer office awareness of, again, I keep coming back to the two phases of this. There is a relief and stabilization phase that we all have a responsibility for. That's the accommodating your licensees when they can't make payments and things like that. But then there's a stimulus phase. And I think more than most groups, we have a responsibility and opportunity on the stimulus side of this business, with translational research, with new venture creation, with investing via our seed and venture funds, to really make sure we're filling the void left by companies that can't make it through this pandemic with new ones that can launch on the other side.
Should we face the also the future of potential budget cuts to the office. All the universities are hurting because of their budgetary issues that are happening from having closed research, having students go home. I mean, how are we positioning ourselves within the broader university community arguments?
So I'd like to talk about the role of tech transfer in rebuilding the universities after this crisis. Will we be looking into it's all about the money again, with the need to generate quick income flows to the university, or there are other ways where we can be helpful and useful for rebuilding our institutions?
And that's where I'll push on, again, driving, your business development efforts to growing the research expenditure base, as well as to driving transactions. We at LVG are as transaction oriented as any office in the country, probably. But I think we can really encourage our licensing people to know what that translational path looks like and to try to drive sponsored research. That could include engaging all of your startup companies to go after SBIRs and STTRs that they might not otherwise have gone after, and using that to leverage matching dollars that are available through the state. So I think there are a lot of ways that we can do new things to grow the research expenditure base. But again, I don't want to hide from the fact that we should contribute our portion. I mean, every unit across grounds is going to be asked for a cut. And I think we have to prepare for that. We're preparing scenarios from steady state to significant cuts. And we've talked before about tech transfer offices routinely being underfunded and unresourced. I think we can still identify resources without people sparing resources, without cutting employees, where we can cut costs, particularly in view of the fact that unlike prior, issues, global issues, economic downturns that we've had to deal with, research expenditures have been turned down. So we have to expect lower disclosure volumes and therefore lower patent filings. So patent budgets might actually be able to be wound down to accommodate some of the cuts that are requested of a tech transfer office.
I mean, one of the things I often think about, and I consciously did that in in the 2008 situation, was to look at the patent budget. And if you have a large patent budget, this works much better. If you've got a sort of $10 million plus patent budget, if instead of patenting, I don't know, 60 to 70% of the disclosures that come in, you cut that back to 50 to 60 or whatever. And on the other side, particularly the conversion to the patent convention patents, instead of going US only, if you cut that back down from 70 to 60 or something, it's amazing how much you can save. You may be able to save $1 million or $2, which may prevent losing very valuable FTEs. Now, there may be some FTEs that you don't want anymore. I don't know. This may be a time to optimize your office, balance up your office skill set, whatever you see there. And you should be thinking about this in the thinking time that you're getting now about what the office might look like if you have to downsize. But you may be able to avoid downsizing by looking at the patent budget and not lose very much in terms of the value by just being more careful and a little bit more concise in your evaluation of what to patent and what not to patent.
Another opportunity, I think, for technology transfer offices that has always existed is education of graduate students and postdocs with the value of technology transfer, of their role and their opportunities to move into startup companies. I think jobs are going to be tight for everybody. I don't know that a lot of the graduate students and postdocs are going to have opportunities. And innovation creates a big opportunity for them. Tech transfer offices has a lot of good information that can be provided to them about this.
This is Kathy. I'm wondering, Amir, you've been sort of COVID central. Does the university look to your office to have all the information for industry and the transfer of technology? Are you the central repository of information?
So we kind of, I have to say, we force ourselves into that bookkeeping position as we saw the influx of projects coming in and disclosures, and my team was called to help to various entrepreneurial activities on campus. One day we woke up and said, hey, we know about all these projects, but doesn't seem to be, nobody seems to be keeping track of them centrally. So we kind of collected that quickly to a spreadsheet, and now we're working on one pages that we can publish, and we offered it to everyone in the university for their good use.
I know Kelly Sexton in Michigan's done a great job with this too, in that I think they were just bombarded with inquiries of how could we help, what's available, what can we do, and really did a nice job setting up a quick and thorough response to all of those inquiries, and became, I think, a default center on all of this.
So that was one of the questions that came up. Do you think that being a repository of information and sending it out, do you think that that's one of the main purposes of tech transfer right now during this crisis?
I don't know if it's the main purpose, but it's definitely a purpose, and so a way for us to be very useful for the campus and the community around the campus. Because at least on the big schools, finding something on campus is challenging sometimes, and for us to clearly present what we're doing is with our current resources is very easy for us, and therefore allows us to be relevant and useful in the near term.
I don't know that we've been pushing information out about COVID, but what we have been trying to do is prioritize, enabling faculty members to test hypotheses that they have about devices and or drugs they've been working on and their applicability to COVID. So trying to help with, be it regulatory guidance or contract manufacture and things like that. We've really tried to be an enabler. But again, I think a lot of our technologies, at least on the therapeutic side, are hypotheses at this point that are a little early for pushing.
And we have a business development task force around COVID. So we're curating technologies, and we're curating potential licensees. So whenever we have something that's interesting, we're able to push it quickly to potential licensees or co-developers and get quick feedback and turnaround time on these initiatives.
So we're about 8 minutes away from the end of the webinar. So Amir and Kathy, I didn't know if there was another topic that you want to touch upon.
I think we covered everything. Unless there are additional questions from the audience, I think we can wrap this up. And thank you, thank all the panelists and people who stayed with us for the last hour.
So one of the last questions that has come up is basically risk versus reward. There's obviously a lot of risk in finding out more about technology and should you invest and all of that. So in regards to risk versus reward, how do you balance that?
That's all we do.
How do you make those decisions?
Best job.
all day, every day, balancing risk and reward. I mean, I think, we touched a lot on translational research and trying to mitigate risk. LVG very clearly takes the tack that is, we are trying to push each and every one of these assets along. And so it's a major de-risking project. Hopefully the reward will come. And we've been hoping for that reward for quite a while now. So we're due. But mitigating risk, I think, is the name of the game right now.
And I think that, a lot of your accelerator programs, both at Madison and throughout other universities, they involve industry experts to work with them on identifying what both the risk and reward is going to be. And when you're trying to develop these technologies before you have to move them into a company, you want to set milestones where you can either kill the technology quickly or add value to it, and that's important. A lot of technologies get moved out and just limp along forever, and they're never going to actually get into a product to help people. So technology offices, accelerator programs can be good at kind of culling out those technologies that are never going to get there and adding value to technologies that are really important.
It seems to me that one of the things we have to accept, and it happened before in the previous crises is that we will have to de-risk by taking later. Any reward we get will be later in the process. So
Right.
we must make it as attractive as we can. Not much in the way, if any, of upfront fees. Clearly spelled out terms for sponsored research. And maybe we just get to a situation where we rely on the ultimate late stage payback is just royalties or something and nothing else. I mean, that is going to happen. Don't let's kid ourselves. When we go back, this will be no time for fancy negotiations. They're a simple, easy to understand negotiation is what's going to be called for with us if us only receiving a reward at the later stages of success.
But Mike, what does that mean to officers that live from 15% or whatever admin fee they take from all income going through their office? If they're going to sacrifice the near-term income, what does that mean to their office?
It means the model may have to change a little bit, I would think. I've always been worried about offices that rely on a fixed percentage of what they bring in, because to some extent that encourages near-term activities which may not be good for the technology.
This is Kathy. We lived on 15% for all these years, and it is the long-term revenue that enabled us to live on that. It's not
Exactly.
the short-term.
Exactly.
The new monies, the yearly fees were minuscule compared to the earned royalties. So my view is take the risk, take reasonable risks now, and do as many licenses as possible, and hope the reward will come in the future. I've always said, you don't know which ones are going to be the winners. So you need to do as many deals as possible.
You were lucky though, Kathy. You had quite a lot of winners to live off. But
no, we didn't know that. None of those winners did we anticipate.
But for other people who don't, I understand the question from Amir. But for other offices that don't have a good running royalty situation or whatever, then the 15% constraint is a big one. So maybe some rethinking would be required, right? We mustn't constrain technology transfer around short-term revenues.
Yes,
otherwise,
I agree with you 100%.
Otherwise,
It also involves educating your administrators, your directors. A long-term view is an important view. It's not just short-term hits.
Well, the whole point is to make sure they truly value the societal impact of the technologies that are going out there,
Right.
rather than just the revenue back to the university.
Yes.
I think that's a perfect time for ending this webinar. Long-term view and societal impact. That seems to be the core values of tech transfer always.
Yes.
So thank you very much to all our panelists and for the audience that stayed with us for the last hour. And this webinar will be available online in the near future, and we'll let you know if you want to watch it offline. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Mara.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, everybody.